Sarah Nadler, welcome to the Unleash Your Confidence show. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great. How about you?
Awesome. I'm so glad that you're here. We are going to talk to our audience today about how to step into their power, how to unleash their confidence, how to become money-making entrepreneurs. And you've got some pretty awesome stuff to talk about today. So I'm going to tell the audience who you are. And so Sarah is a certified life coach and award-winning author for small business owners. Her signature program is the B Movement, helps clients bring lifestyle back into their business and achieve a work-life balance. So good. And so, Sarah, I know you have your business. You mentor and coach some pretty big names and some pretty awesome people. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit as far as the level of which you coach. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
When you say level, can you give me a little bit of clarity around that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I know that before we were talking a little bit and you were saying like your audience is, 6 and 7 figures and that they've got big businesses. And so I think that what I really want to do is have you relate to the people that are listening, because our audience today is female entrepreneurs who are, for the most part, just getting started in their business. And I think it would be exciting for them to see and to hear a little bit about what you do for as far as your life coaching.
Sure. Okay. So the majority of my clients are actually healthcare professionals, health coaches, doctors, dentists, optometrists. And yes, it's true. They do have large multi-million-dollar practices. But what's interesting that I find is a lot of these guys went to dental school. They went to veterinary school. They went to chiropractic school. They did not go to business school. So believe it or not, a lot of them are right where you're at, right? If you're listening to this and you are day one of business, or you've been in it for a year or so and you're still in that like struggling, I get butterflies when I talk to clients stage, believe it or not, these guys are not that much farther than you when it comes to the marketing and the sales aspect, because they know their zone of genius cold, right? They know exactly what they're doing as a doctor, but not always as a business person. And that's where I come in, which makes it very exciting because I get to dive in. And normally in my experience, this is true for people who are starting out day one and people who've been in business forever, is I can usually find something that if we just, it's not that you don't have anything in place, it's that we just need to tweak something in the right direction. And I think that's why we have life coaches, right? That's why we have business consultants, and it makes my job a lot of fun.
Isn't it amazing how sometimes people can be just on the right path, but there's, one little thing that they need to tweak, and it could be the smallest thing. It could be a big thing, but it could be just one thing that can just project them into the next level of success. It's crazy.
It's so
crazy
true
to think about it like that, because, we are really that close to achieving what we want to achieve, right? That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So I want to talk to you today about your book. And so do you want to tell us, maybe tell us what it was that inspired you to write a book, for starters, and then what inspired you to write this book?
Sure. So to begin with, I've actually been a published author for a number of years, but I've always been in fiction, always for children. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, so storytelling was something I got started on very early. But it wasn't until I had a rough experience myself in my early 20s that I decided I needed to write this book. And actually, it took me 10 years to get around the courage to write this book. Walking Past Expectations is a nonfiction work. It's my very first nonfiction work, and it is the only award-winning book I've ever written. So obviously I was on the wrong track with all my fiction. But if you're looking for a little fun, those are fun to read too. But this one was a much more serious, and it was around the fact that in my early 20s, I encountered a rumor campaign against me that started with a colleague and spread I ended up losing my job. It spread to my husband, who was a coworker as well. One reason why you should never work with your husband. And it ended up becoming my ex-husband over that. It was a lie. It had never been true. And I couldn't outrun it. It seemed like everywhere I turned, I was running into perfect strangers who said, "Oh, you were that girl." And it was shocking to me, having never really run into that. I mean, you hear about all these horror stories in high school about the girl who has a bad rumor follower. That was never me. I never experienced that until I was in my early 20s. And like I said, I could not outrun it. And so I talk about this story in my book, and I tell the story of what happened because it actually led me in the direction of becoming who I am today as a life coach. And the focus that I have on human rights and, the dignity of the human soul, because when you've been through something like that, where you feel surrounded by haters and doubters and people who are going, "Oh, she's going to fail because look what she did," when it wasn't even true, and that's not who you really are, I found that is a powerful, powerful place to be when you, I guess I should say a powerless place to be, right? But it can have a powerful change on who you are. And I think at one point I just decided there's two directions I can go. I can go down the road of, well, they think I did it, so I might as well go do it anyway, right? Or I can take the high road and make something of my life in spite of everything people were saying. And that's what I did. And I'm so glad I did, because I've been really blessed ever since then.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And personally, I've never been in that position, but I have been in the powerless position. And, and I think, we all experience that on some level. And for you to really become vulnerable, let yourself become vulnerable and pour it into a book that will help other people to overcome that. It's an amazing thing for you to do. So thank you for doing that. And so I've got a question on your book. And so really it's the idea of it is walking past the naysayers and the haters, right? Am I right in that? And so what do you think is the best way? I mean, I'll go back a little bit, but for a lot of entrepreneurs, one of the biggest things that holds us back is exactly that: doubters, naysayers, haters, people that don't believe in us. And that's one of the biggest things that holds us back as entrepreneurs, I do believe. And so what do you think is a good way to approach that when it's your family and friends?
So here's the first thing I discovered, because the reason why I wrote this book, yes, I'd had that bad experience, but 10 years and I hadn't written the book, right? I never even thought about writing a book. And then I started my own business in 2018. And it happened again, just as you're saying, like friends, family members, that hurts, right? When you go, wow, I finally just came out of the worst time period of my life. I'm in a good place right now and I want to expand, and now you're going to turn your back on me. It is the weirdest feeling sometimes, where you're not sure, because you've loved that person your whole life. It may be someone you completely respect and admire in many other ways, and they're giving you their best advice, which is to, pardon my French, but shut up and sit down, right? That's not who you are. So I guess what made this book powerful for a lot of my clients is the fact that I took everything I had learned from that bad experience and used it when that started to happen as an entrepreneur, and managed to completely overcome it and not let it affect me and grow my business and completely ignore all of that, which I would never in a million years have been able to do 10 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, if it's coming from someone who you truly respect and admire, and they're a friend or a family member, the first thing I will say is, don't burn that bridge, right? Your instinct is to push back on what they're saying, right? Now, if you're a total introvert, you're actually, you might even feel the need to introvert further and just dive into yourself and give up. Both of those are the wrong thing to do, as we already know, right? Here, what I recommend is the first thing you do is, in a quiet moment by yourself, actually put down on paper who you want to be, right? Because that's usually what we're trying to do. Yes, we're trying to grow a business. Yes, we're trying to make, 6-7 figure business. But at the same time, usually there's something that you have in your mind, some picture of who you are going to be when this is over. And that's the very first step I actually talk about in my book is wake up different, right? It's not a matter of, okay, I've decided that's who I want to be and someday I'll be that. You actually have to start being that person now. You have to start being that person today. And like I said, sometimes it's hard to do, right? Because you've been someone else your whole life and you're trying to step into your own for the first time, stand up for yourself, maybe even stand up to someone, right?
Yes.
Like a parent figure or an older sibling or a cousin who's always been getting you down your whole life. You're trying to step into your own. And the only way to do it is to just do it. And that's why I say wake up different. Like just go to bed one night saying tomorrow I'm going to be a different person. And when you wake up the next morning, you are that new person and nothing anyone says is allowed to shake that. And it's something you have to do from here. And when it's really hard, I actually coach people to go back and look again. Make sure you found the right person on paper. Because if you're really struggling with doing that, it's probably because you're now trying to be someone you're not.
Oh,
rather
I
than
love
having
that
to figure
so
out who
much.
you are.
I love that so much because so many times when we're struggling or we feel like, we've got somebody that in our life that doesn't believe in us, our first thought is, well, how can I prove to them that it's worth it? How can I prove to them that I'm going to have success? And then it's not about us anymore. It's about, and that's how we start to lose our traction. And so I love that you're saying, look into yourself and decide, who do you want to be? And start being that person that you want to be, right? Oh, that's so powerful. I love it. And so do you think that it's better, when you have the self-doubt, do you feel like it's better to just press on, or do you feel like it's better to withdraw, or, is there other strategies that you have when it comes to self-doubt?
Yeah. So again, a lot of it comes back having done that first step where you've really nailed who you are now, right? Like, who are you going to be? It can't be about, I'm going to be that person someday. It has to be, I'm this person today. I just haven't shown it yet. Right. And when you have confidence in that internally, then it becomes a lot easier when you're hearing the naysaying, you're hearing the doubters, to have some confidence, right? Even if it's only internal. Then, of course, it becomes a matter of drilling, actually expressing that. And that sometimes there's a whole emotional curve you go through on that one. And again, that's why we have life coaches, right? Trying to do that on your own can sometimes be rough. But if you're on your own, you have no support system whatsoever, my biggest recommendation to you is to remember this quote, which is actually, it's a quote by Sun Tzu, okay? Out of his book called The Art of War. This book has been around for thousands of years. It's from China. And my favorite quote I wrote down right here, it's, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, right? This is where a lot of people go wrong, is they try to go into confrontation. They try to go, oh, I'm hearing all of these doubts from others, have this self-doubt, which is mixing with their own doubt of me. So I'm just going to and they start trying to smack up against that rather than finding a way around it, right? Like if you're having self-doubts, rather than trying to just plow on your own, either find a life coach, find some support, right? Get the help you need to get more confident, or find a way around that, because you always will find one. It's the funniest thing. But when you start just like, I'm not getting anywhere, realize that you're fighting a war that you can't win and you have to go find another one.
Yes. And I love that, having support. It really is important, I believe, for all of us, not just as entrepreneurs and business owners, but as, just as a person growing and becoming a better version of ourselves. We need to have that support. And if we don't have that circle of support, and even if we do have that circle of support, having a business coach, a life coach, a vision coach, somebody that's going to hold that vision for you and believe in you and holds you to it, right? So right. Good.
Yeah.
So go.
In some cases, even if you don't have a life coach, right? You can have someone who's trained to help people in your situation. But if you don't have that support, at least find someone who's a little further ahead in business than you are. It doesn't have to be someone making 6 or 7 figures. If you're making nothing, it could be someone who's making $1,000 a month. It's just someone further ahead than you, because it helps sometimes to have someone who's been right where you're at, right? So surrounding yourself, I mean, I know I'm not the only person to say this, but it's true. Surround yourself with people who've been where you are and have succeeded. Because part of what can happen is your friends and family, they've been punching in, punching out 9 to 5 their whole lives, and they think that that's the only way to do it. It's not that they're evil, or you'll run into some people, and we'll talk about that in a minute, right? Some people who truly do not have your best interests at heart. But usually when it's friends and family, most of the time they really think they're helping you. And that's why I say, don't burn that bridge. Just find a way to acknowledge what they have to say, and have enough encouragement in your own heart that you can out create it, overcome it.
And they do, you know what? And I was at one point that person who didn't have the intention of being a naysayer, right? But I thought I was doing good for the person by telling them maybe that wasn't the right direction, and it was never my spot to say that, right? And over time and over learning, you realize that it isn't your spot to say that, because if somebody really does have a belief and want to pursue something, then it's not up to us to tell them that they can't. But it does come from a good place usually, or I shouldn't say usually, sometimes it comes from a place of you want them to do better, and you just don't know a different way, right?
The one other thing I wanted to say about dealing with friends and family in particular, particularly family, right? Usually your parents, the people in your life, they have a picture in their own mind of where you should be. And that's just the truth, right? Parents do that. Even friends do that. And one of the best ways you can overcome that without burning that bridge is to do good works and tell them about that. Meaning not just what you consider good, but what they consider good, right? I'll give you a great example of this. My mother absolutely hated the fact that I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years. She practically disowned me, okay? And it wasn't until I started recognizing that all she really wanted was validation as a mother, and just started like pouring money and time into every Easter, like this enormous Easter basket. And then every Mother's Day, just the biggest bouquet I could afford, and really just pushing how much I loved and cared about her, that she started to support my business. Before that, the fact that I was an entrepreneur was like saying I worshiped the devil. It was the worst thing I ever could have done. But the moment I started validating her as a mother and saying how it was impossible for me to have done this without her, despite the fact that she was completely pulling me down, that was the moment when our relationship was repaired.
That's interesting. Let me ask you, I want to go back a little bit to your story about when people were spreading lies. And I want to ask you, Sarah, so what did you do in that situation when you discovered the lies and you realized what was happening? And so, like, how did you deal with that, and what did you do?
Well, so for the first couple years, I did everything wrong. Right? So don't take a lesson from me at the beginning, but just to give you an idea of, right, how wrong you can go and how natural it can feel to do the wrong thing. My first instinct was, that's not true, and to run around and try to prove it. I mean, that seems super logical to me. But here's the thing. It's so easy for someone to say, well, I heard it from Joe and he's not a liar, so therefore it must be true, right? So you have to recognize that in that type of situation where it's an actual lie, it's not something you really genuinely did and you need to, repair the damage. It's a genuine lie that someone with an evil intention towards you is intentionally spreading, right? I don't think that's a situation a lot of entrepreneurs will necessarily have experience, but when you have, you know what I'm talking about, and it's this strange mystery in your own head because you don't know who started it, right? And so it's just seeming to come from everywhere. So when I finally started to get on top of it was when I did just what I told you, which is start doing good works and actually start moving the needle on my own business and on my own goals. When I started doing that, suddenly people realized that I could not have possibly done what they thought I did, because if I had, I would not be doing so well in life. And that's the funny thing is, If you allow something like that, if you allow doubters and feeders to destroy your life and then not pick the pieces back up and start going again, then you kind of confirm in people's minds that it must have been true. And it's a sad thing, but that's just how it works, right? So you have to actually do what I like to call flourish and prosper, meaning just go out and make things happen anyway, in spite of and on top of and over and against everything that's happening, and start proving to yourself first, right, that you are who you originally thought you were, not listen to what they're saying, and eventually people will start to see that too. And it can be rough, it can be tough, but you can do it. Anybody can do it. And I proved that with my book. A lot of people have written to me and said that just reading the steps I covered in there have changed things for them.
Wow, there you go. That's really good advice. I like it. And you know, allowing us to understand, I guess is the word, that we aren't always right and we can make mistakes. And sometimes that can, you know, take us into a tailspin of, you know, into the wrong direction. But having belief in ourselves is so important, and making sure that we just stay the course and always, you know, don't forget that what we're doing is the right thing. So that's good.
That's right.
Let's talk about introverts and extroverts for a sec. And so I know we talked about, you know, I talked about this before, and so I have always been an introvert, always been in my entire life. And I've put myself into jobs and into leadership roles where I've really had to pull out my extroverted side. And but I always had, and one of the biggest things for me was I always tried, not so much now, not anymore, but before, I tried to avoid confrontation. It was a big deal for me, always a big deal for me. And, you know, just the way that I would feel, I would get anxiety if I even thought confrontation was about to arise. And I know that this is true for a lot of people. And I know that you do have some expertise in this field. So let's talk about how, you know, is there a good way to avoid confrontation? Should we avoid confrontation?
So here's the thing, it really depends obviously on the scenario. So let's talk about an actual scenario, right? Let's say that you are an introverted person, you're faced with a possible confrontation with someone who's doubting you or actually hating on what you're doing, right? What I like, the skill that I like to give such introverts, because I absolutely used to be one and I'm not anymore, but I used to actually have a big problem with this. My mother, when I was a teenager, used to tell me I would be allowed to eat pizza if I would call the pizza man and order it. And I couldn't even do that. Okay, so ask her, it's the true story. So this is something I struggled with all through high school and into my early 20s. It wasn't until that horrible thing happened and I had to come out of my shell if I was even going to survive or come out of it, that I finally managed to overcome it and sort of cure that in myself. Not to say it's a disease, but it certainly felt like it to me.
Yeah.
But like I said, coming back to this tool, the tool I like to give is what I like to call the mic drop, right? You guys have all seen the guy says something, he's talking, and then he goes, and that's that, boom, and just walks away, right? Now, anybody who's ever been in charge of AV equipment hates mic drops because it actually destroys the microphone. But those of us who are introverts, it actually gives you a lot of power, because here's what happens when you do a mic drop, and I'll explain how to do it in a minute. You mic drop your statement, you actually close the door on argument. And that's what frightens a lot of us on the subject of confrontation. It's not the original giving of the communication, it's having to handle the rebuttal, right?
Yeah.
It's not that you can't say something, it's you're terrified of what might come out of the other person's mouth, and then you're gonna have to find something else to say. And usually for those of us who are introverts, the first statement we made, we thought about it for 30 days, right?
And that was the only thing we thought about.
It in our head, right? And so that part's relatively easy. Mm-hmm. It's all the rebuttal and then having to talk about it. And if it's a difficult thing, something we're already not super certain of ourselves and have some self-doubts about, oh man, we're lost, right? So just deliver it with a mic drop. Like literally just, hey mom, I'm starting a business. And then go find something to do in the kitchen. Like, get out of the room and let that person go through all the emotional states that they're going to go through, and then come at you with a question later on, right? When you probably have now been thinking of all the 8 questions they might ask you, and now you've thought of an answer, right? Like, it gives you time to internalize what they might say. And if necessary, just repeat your mic drop. You don't even have to handle their objections, right? Because remember, you don't need anyone's permission but your own to do anything in your life that is a pro-survival activity.
That is funny, actually, to me, the mic drop scenario. And I can really see how that can work. It's perfect. And
It
so
does.
do you think that that success or levels of success, do you think it is different whether you are an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm not gonna lie, I think extroverts have such a leg up when it comes to business. I think they are so blessed, but do I think that you will hit a ceiling in your business if you're not an extrovert? No, because if you're good at what you do, right, if you deliver it to such a level that people are super grateful and have, like, you're creating transformations with whatever you do, whether you're selling something on Amazon or you're a life coach, it doesn't matter. If you're delivering something that people really genuinely need, you know what? You're going to create enough business. You can hire the extroverts to be your salespeople and to be your marketing people and to create your video content. You don't have to be that to succeed. I do think it'll be harder, and that is obviously why I love what I do, because I get to help people with that. But I don't believe that can hold you back.
I do agree with you. And I also, further to that, I know, introverts have this way of sitting back and observing and listening and taking things in a totally different way than extroverts. And so every person is so unique and has their own amazing qualities when it comes to different leadership skills. And I think that it's important for us to remember that even though we might have that voice inside of our head that tells us that success is meant for people who were, born leaders and born extroverts with, more passion or whatever it is, but introverts, we still absolutely have that ability to have massive success. And we can't compare introverts to extroverts when it comes to that, really, right? And that could be the biggest thing that holds us back as introverts, is saying, oh, I don't have what she has, right? But really, you don't have what she has, but she doesn't have what you have either. That's good.
That's right. And truth be told, necessity is the mother of invention, right? When you are faced with a moment in your business when you have to be a little bit extroverted, you will find the power within you if it's important enough to you, and I'm telling you, you have abilities that you have never dreamed of. And I've seen that happen so many times. So I think that we as women have to not use that as an excuse, right? And just find a way around it.
That's right. And so on that note, let's talk a little bit about confidence and what is your advice on how we can build up our confidence when we do have people in our life that aren't breathing belief into us? Do you have any tips for people that are dealing with those kind of situations?
I guess the first thing I will say is it really depends on, again, what situation, right? If this is a family member or someone you respect otherwise, they have a lot of good traits and their good outweighs their bad, then really I recommend, honestly, not to self-promote, but read my book and actually apply the steps there to see if you can handle that person. Because a lot of the times they can be handled, right? They're not bad people. They're just misguided in you, right? They don't know you as well as you do. And so they think they're helping you. And that just needs to be handled. And, nothing's going to do but rolling up your sleeves and getting in there and handling them, right? But there are situations, and I'm telling you right now, there are situations where that person does not have your best interests at heart. And you have to disconnect from them if you want to get ahead in your business and in your life. And I've run into a few people like that myself. And I'll tell you, from working with my clients who are themselves 6 and 7 figure entrepreneurs, the bigger you get, the more people like that you will attract, because they see in you something worth attacking. I always tell my guys, you know, my clients, take it as a compliment. If you're not pushing, if you're not moving the needle in your business, you will attract no haters. So when you have no haters in your life, you're obviously thinking too small, and you have to get into that mentality of just block, right? You have to get into the mentality where you're willing to sever your connection with people who are holding you back. Not the good people who think they're helping, right? But the ones who actually have nobody's best interest in mind, not even their own. Right? They're antisocial personality disorder. It's a real thing. They're sociopaths, and you can't grow when you're in that shadow.
So this is something that just came to my mind, and I know we didn't talk about this, so I don't want to throw you for a loop, but I know, so a lot of people who do have naysayers in their life, it happens to be their spouse. And so
Sure.
I know you're not a relationship coach per se, but do you have any tips on that, when maybe it's our husband or our boyfriend or our fiance, somebody that's not believing in us and that maybe thinks that we shouldn't be pursuing our passions or our dreams?
Yeah. You know what's funny is I have found that people are people, regardless of whether you're married to them or you were born from them, right? Whether you're connected with them by business or any other, the same basic rules and laws apply, right? The person you're married to, obviously you had a connection at some point.
Yes.
You probably still have things about them that you love if you're still married to them. So again, the same thing applies. You have to be able for yourself to take an honest look, like take a step back and go, does this person truly think that they're helping me by telling me not to do this? In which case, you got to apply those 8 steps in my book, right? And nail it for yourself, your confidence, and then convince them in the right way with not winning the war by fighting, but finding ways around them that you can actually accomplish it. And if they're not actually doing it out of your best interest, then you're going to have to think about, you know, actually getting some marriage counseling or possibly even ending that relationship, because it's not a healthy relationship. And I'm not going to advise that you do that because I don't know the situation, right? But I am saying that I think the same rules apply. I've been very blessed in my second marriage, right? My first marriage, not so much. So I really, you know, does that make me a bad person? I don't know. But at the same time, I do know it makes me an excellent life coach, because I've been able to help people through situations like that and just help them make their partner see that, yes, this is going to be tough on both of us to begin with, but my goal, my vision is going to be worth it 1,000,000 times over, and I will make it happen. And at least for me, when I have a client tell that to their spouse, from their heart, right, in their own words, not using mine, they see a change in the other person when that other person really starts to believe that this is something that's not a whim, right? It's not just a hobby for you. It's something that's going to change both of your lives forever. And if you really believe that and you communicate it to them and they love you, in a lot of cases, you'll see that person's mind change. And it's true. Sometimes it takes some repetition, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are having to make a big change too, and sometimes support you in ways they weren't necessarily intending to when you first got married.
That's right.
But it is
And
possible.
that's really good advice, Sarah. And I know it can be a really touchy subject, but that in my clients and in my past, that's the biggest thing that has come up as far as naysayers, is that it's, you know, it is the spouse. And so it is tricky to give that advice, but it's true. And it really goes back to one of the first things we talked about is looking inside of ourselves, and still writing down, who do you want to be, and using that, right? So good.
That's
okay.
Right.
Last thing is, I know you had something really special for the listeners today to help them to get through. Yeah. Do you want to tell them about that?
Yeah. So I actually have created, for my book, a 37-page workbook that you can use. It has checklists, it has mindset exercises in it. It goes over every section of my book and how to apply it to different situations and scenarios that you're running into. And I am giving it to you guys for free, you gals. So I'm very excited about it. I would love to hear anybody's feedback. And it does tell you at the very end how to contact me, because I've heard so many stories, domestic abuse, all kinds of things, right? And one of my favorite things to do is to hear the end of the story, right? The happy ever after, when you've read the book and you've applied it and actually turned things around and your business is on its way to 6 or 7 figures and beyond. So I'm really excited to share that with you all today.
That's an amazing gift. And I'll post the link for them to download it just below this video. And that's awesome. So is there anything that you wanted to leave our audience with today? Any last words?
I have 3 rules that I apply when I'm handling any doubters or haters. And I want you guys to know these rules right now because they're common pitfalls. Okay, so here's the first one. Never lie. I know that sounds horrible, but it can be such an instinct sometimes when you're faced with someone to just be like, well, I'm already making 6 figures, or, find some excuse why it's okay. You don't need anyone's excuse, honey. You have everything you need inside you to succeed. You don't need lies and excuses to make it okay, give you permission. You have your own permission, and that's all you need. Rule number 2, don't ever do your enemy's work for them, okay? So if someone says something bad about your business, don't tell other people that. Keep it inside you or share it with the people who support you so that they can help you move through that. But don't put the lies or the bad news and things like that on your own communication lines, okay? Don't send it out by email. Don't put it on social media. Keep it within. And talk to your therapist. Talk to your life coach if you need to. Step 3 is always put your big, hairy, audacious goals first. Right? No matter what happens, the noise that a business can put off when you're trying to build it and just splatter all over your life can be extreme. And just always keep your eye on the mountain you're trying to climb. Okay, so those are my 3 rules, and I'm so grateful just for you having me on the show today. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. I adore your passion, and your message has been more than valuable. So thank you. And we'll see everybody tomorrow on the next episode of Unleash Your Confidence.